Hello and welcome. I am Lopamudra Moitro and you are listening to my weekly podcast, What's in a Story, where I read stories from my books along with a small introduction about each. These stories are from my work as an anthropologist from across India and South Asia, and the introductions with each story helps to explain different related information about, say, maybe aspects like history, languages and literature, music, trade and economy, festivals, or facts about archaeology, and many other things which are all important to understand or get a meaning or a context of a story. In this second season, we will listen specially to narratives of and about water bodies from Asia, and this will include stories from the smallest of water bodies like wells or small ponds to lakes, rivers, or the sea and the ocean. Let's listen to today's episode in season 2 of What's in a Story.
About today's story. Today's story is about an interesting pattern of folklore, a bit of which I have already spoken about in the last episode, the one about the ant couple, Mr. and Mrs. Ant. And this is an aspect which is reflected in most rivers in South Asia, which is basically, this pattern speaks about most rivers of South Asia is mentioned as a male or a female river in folklore, in mythology, across the region. In today's episode, I would like to specially speak about this, and it's a repeated pattern amidst especially the Himalayan rivers of South Asia, and there of course there are many tributaries and distributaries. The pattern, very interestingly, is also the common aspect of these rivers and also speaks about, reveals themes of reverence, interdependence, and the consequence of human action on nature. Now, this is something very interesting presently concerning a lot of studies which are based about interaction of man with nature, the influence of man with nature across the last couple of centuries. So mostly several of these folklores already somewhere or the other has been highlighting the same. The stories explain the divine origins of rivers, personifying them as life-giving gods or goddesses, or as beings connected to very powerful gods. The lessons draw from mythological narratives like the descent of the Ganga and the creation of the Kaveri and so on. And there are many others. Now, these patterns also often include aspects which even highlight the flow of the rivers, which can be straight or meandering. Of course, the geographical reasons for the meandering aspect, or how it's flowing, whether it's flowing straight or it's cutting through rocks and it's meandering its way, there are many the geographical explanation, which includes aspects like river cuts through the softer sections of rocks much more easily and makes its way, while the harder ones do get eroded over a long lengthy period of time, but at a much slower pace. This in turn creates some beautiful structures, the rocky structures on the way. On the other hand, the accumulated or the collected debris, the broken stones, are further broken down. They are rubbing against each other. They get further broken down, and the pieces becomes much more fine, and into very fine grains finally, and they are further deposited at different parts in the lower reaches of the river, along with various types of mud and clay, which also the river happens to pick up as it flows down. However, the folklore has some very interesting way of explaining all of this circuitous journey of a river and its flow, uphill, sometimes downhill, and today's story is especially famous in the Indian state of Sikkim and speaks about this, and this is about the two rivers, Teesta and Rangit. Interestingly enough, there are similar stories. The pattern is repeated in folklore related to some other rivers even in the region, and especially say Bhutan, and maybe I would like to speak on that in the next episode. Looking here a little bit more about this Lepcha legend about the two rivers Teesta and Rangit, I read from my book. Story is originally in the Lepcha language. It has been retold and written by Dr. Sonam Wangyal, especially for the book They All Deliver the Good News All Night Long, Folktales, Legends and Modern Lore of India by Aleph Book Company. Most rivers' names in Lepcha begin with the prefix Rang, which according to K.P. Tamsang means stretched out or widespread or extensive or extended. The names generally end with ang, a sound, ang sound, which simply means water. Addressing a river as ang is not common nowadays, however. Teesta and Rangit have always been associated with the people of Darjeeling, the Darjeeling region of northern Bengal. Especially the Lepchas, ardor, ethos, legends, music, history and even worship. Mainwaring maintains that the nomen proprium of river Rangit is Rangnit, Ang, while that of river Teesta is Rang New. The Rang New of the Teesta is the biggest river in the district, and almost all the rivers in this region are tributaries of it, including the Great or the Bara and the Little or the Chota Rangit rivers. This story regarding the confluence of the Rangit and the Teesta is a very famous legend of the Lepchas in the region. The Lepchas have in deference to the two great rivers a benediction that goes, "May your name be celebrated as the rivers Rangnyo and Rangit." The Bhutias and the Tibetans call the river Rangnit Chu, meaning where Chu means water or river. They hold the Teesta in very high regards and call it Sangchu or pure water. A little about the author Sonam B. Wangyal, a physician, author and a renowned researcher on Darjeeling and the adjoining Himalayan region. He has worked as Registrar of Medicine under UNDP in the Kingdom of Lesotho, Southern Africa, and as Chief of Level 1 Clinic UNDP, South Sudan. He was also a columnist for New Plus, The Statesman, Himal, Tibetan World Magazine, Flat File, Himalayan Times and Sikkim Observer. He has been on the editorial board of Ladakh Journal, and some of his important books are Sikkim and Darjeeling, Division and Destruction, Footprints in the Himalayas, Duars vis-a-vis Gorkhaland, and others. Follows the story, the Lepcha legend of the Teesta and Rangit rivers. The story. the Lepcha legend of the Teesta and Rangit rivers. Of the many stories connected with the rivers Rangit and Teesta among the Lepchas, there is one which is a story of love, acrimony and reconciliation between the two. According to this legend, Rangit and Rangnu, that is Teesta, fell in love in their heavenly abode. They decided to meet in the deep forest in Pazok, which is more famous now as Peshok or tea estate by the same name, far below their celestial homes. Both of them took a guide each. Rangnu had Parilbu, the king of the serpents, while Rangit had a tooth foe, the blue-naped pitta bird. The serpent king took a straight course and got Rangnu to the rendezvous much ahead of time, and there she patiently waited for her sweetheart to arrive. While the bird, feeling hungry, flew here, there and everywhere in search of food, making Rangit's course circuitous and a much longer one. Finally, reaching the rendezvous, Rangit was embarrassed that Rangnu had already arrived much earlier, and suddenly he was angry to see that the passage onwards was blocked because there Rangnu lay, waiting for him to arrive, and there was no way that he could move forward. It was at this juncture that Rangit blurted out, "Teesta nonto?" meaning, "When did you arrive?" It is said that following this, the Lepcha Rangnu, the name, came to be called as Teesta. Unable to bear his bruised ego, Rangit decided to return upstream. Teesta followed, imploring her lover to return back and to continue their intended journey. It was only when they reached Rangliot and Rangnerun villages that Rangit realized his mistake and chose to run its original downward course with his beloved Teesta. Very appropriately thus, Rangliot translates as the brimful great river, or the brim, top and edge of height reached by the river, and Rangnerun translates from the Lepcha as the turning of the great river, and it marks the point where the rivers recede.